Hello everyone, Patricia Warby, Alchemy Therapies, my emotional audit and the emotional masterclass. And today I want to talk about a book that I've been reading. I'm halfway through, so this is only going to be a part review. I prefer to sort of tell you about it in the segments that I'm actually reading, because otherwise you lose the detail. And this book is The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Firstenberg. It's a very important book. It's quite a thick book, as you can tell. It's all about how electricity has shaped the modern world, but it's more than that. It's about how electromagnetic frequencies, or EMFs, affect biological organisms, including us. And what I'm learning here is quite startling, that some of the diseases we take for granted now in modern life, diabetes, cancer, heart disease in particular, and things like chronic fatigue syndrome, may be environmentally caused. Now, my belief is that emotions are a really big part of these kinds of conditions, particularly chronic fatigue syndrome. And I'm not changing my view on that. I think emotions interact with your environment, and so may make you more susceptible, for instance, to electricity, to electromagnetic radiation. We know that people who suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome are more highly sensitive than the average person. And certainly in this book, he's talking about how there is a subsegment of the population who are highly sensitive to these frequencies that we cannot see, hence invisible rainbow. He's talking about the radio frequencies, Wi-Fi, even kind of the smog, electro smog that comes off normal connections in your home. And he's talking about the research underlying this that shows us that the peaks in some of the diseases that we see, particularly flu, he talks about influenza as being an environmentally caused disease. Now, he's not saying that the virus doesn't exist. He's saying that what triggers the virus to become virulent is these kind of surges in EMFs that occur throughout our history, where we've introduced a new technology which we are not biologically wired to understand, that our biology hasn't adapted to. And the first surge was telegraphs. Telegraphs in the 1880s. There was, in 1889, there was a massive surge in flu for the first time, really. That was the first pandemic as such, that corresponded with the rapid proliferation of telegraph wires throughout our towns and cities, both in the US and in Europe. And then the second wave was in the part of the First World War. I think it was 1919, was the second wave of influenza. We called that the Spanish flu. But it actually simultaneously arose in different parts of the world. It's not true that it started in Spain and spread. Apparently, it's more likely it appeared in different parts simultaneously and sort of spread outwards. It's not even spread by contact, according to Arthur. So it's more likely spread atmospherically. But that corresponded with the huge surge in radio waves, which were used throughout the First World War. Radio packs would be carried on the back of knapsacks, which the different units would carry with them. And then there were radio masts strategically placed in order to keep connection with what was happening on the front. So radio was the second wave. Then there was the era of satellites in the 1960s and the 1950s, 1960s, and there's another surge then. And today, of course, we have Wi-Fi, 4G coming into 5G. And so the understanding here is that this affects not just us, it affects all living things. And so he's also talking about bee colony disease. He's talking about birds migrating, the alteration in their migration patterns, because they have sensors in their brains which enable them to connect with the Earth's magnetic field, which, by the way, is shifting at the moment. So we're making huge changes, some of them random through climate change. Some of them, I think, are deliberately being manipulated by scientists. We know that there's a lot of work going on in Antarctica, for instance, on that. Stanford are involved. There's other major universities that are kind of investigating, but at the same time, they're also pulsing the Earth with these unknown, unnatural frequencies to see what happens. You know, man is a very inquisitive species. We want to kind of try it and see, and that seems to be what's happening, but at great cost to our health. He also talks about neuroasthenia, which is the term given to what we now call chronic fatigue or kind of nervous system diseases of unknown origin. And he said that up until about the 1880s, 1890s, it was a very well understood term, but then Freud came along and started, you know, talking about how most disease was neurotic in origin. It was psychosomatic, in other words, it was psychological in base. And that made sure that the understanding of environmental disease was put back by about 100 years, because then everybody assumed that it was created in the brain by people overreacting, getting anxiety. Now, we know anxiety is a feature of these conditions, but it's not the cause. The anxiety is the result, we now think, of this environmental sensitivity to the kinds of electromagnetic information that we're receiving, for which we have no adaptive capacity, or we have very little. Now, we are seeing that we are adapting gradually, but as each wave comes in and it's stronger and more in depth, I guess, the waveforms are like the current 5G is going to have very high intensity microwave radiation, and it'll be on your street, on my street. So we have to be aware that our bodies may take a while to resolve this for us if they can, and maybe we need to question whether technology is just this benign thing that we can allow to expand at will. Maybe we need to question, is the risk benefit enough to justify that? So I'm halfway through the book. I want to continue, but that's my update for now. I would say go out and buy this book, or borrow it like I have from your local library, to support your local library. And I'll follow up with my next one very shortly. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.